What if the person you almost walked away from was never the problem? What if they were the mirror your mind refused to understand? Not everyone you feel strongly about is random. Some people don't enter your life by chance. They enter like an echo from something inside you that you haven't met yet. Some connections feel fated because they activate deep inner patterns in the psyche that already exist before we even meet the other person. It is not that the person brings something entirely new into your life, but rather they awaken something that has been dormant within you for a long time. These patterns are formed through early emotional experiences, unmet needs, attachments, fears, and unexpressed desires that quietly shape how we respond to intimacy. When someone enters your life and touches these hidden layers, the reaction feels unusually strong, almost like recognition rather than discovery. The mind does not experience this kind of activation as neutral. It creates meaning around it. It starts to interpret intensity as significance and emotional disturbance as destiny. This is why a connection can feel meant to be, even when it is confusing or unstable. The unconscious tends to repeat familiar emotional themes in different forms until they are fully understood. So when you meet someone who fits into that internal pattern, the psyche responds with heightened attention, as if something important is being revisited. This feeling of fate is often strengthened by projection. You may not just see the person as they are, but also as a carrier of qualities you long for, fear, or have not yet integrated within yourself. In that sense, the connection becomes larger than reality. It feels charged because it is carrying both the actual person and the emotional history you bring into the interaction. That is why these experiences can feel so powerful and undeniable. The intensity is not only about the other person, but about the meeting point between them and your inner world. People often mistake emotional intensity for destiny because the human mind naturally equates strong feeling with strong meaning. When something creates a powerful emotional reaction, it feels important, almost undeniable, as if it must be significant in a larger sense. But intensity is not a reliable measure of truth. It is simply the nervous system responding strongly to stimulation, often because something familiar or unresolved has been touched. In relationships, intensity can come from unpredictability, emotional highs and lows, or the sudden activation of attachment systems. When someone feels both deeply attractive and emotionally uncertain, the mind becomes more alert, more focused, and more invested. This heightened state can easily be misread as "this must be special" or "this must be meant to be," when in reality it may just be emotional activation rather than emotional alignment. There is also a psychological bias toward meaning-making. The mind dislikes randomness in emotional experiences, so it tries to create a story that explains the intensity. Destiny becomes a convenient explanation because it removes uncertainty. If something feels overwhelming, calling it fate feels safer than admitting confusion or inconsistency. It gives structure to something that might otherwise feel chaotic. Another layer is that intense connections often mirror unresolved internal conflicts. When someone touches both your comfort and your insecurity at the same time, the emotional signal becomes amplified. You feel pulled toward them and unsettled by them simultaneously, which creates a loop of fixation. That loop can feel profound, but it is often just the psyche trying to resolve internal tension through external focus. Because of this, people can stay attached to emotionally intense experiences long after their actual compatibility has been questioned. The intensity becomes addictive, not necessarily meaningful. Over time, what was mistaken for destiny may simply be a pattern of emotional overactivation that the mind struggled to interpret clearly. Attraction can come from the unconscious, not just conscious choice. which means that what draws you to someone is often happening below the level of awareness, where decisions are normally made. On the surface, you may believe you are choosing someone based on clear preferences, shared values, appearance, or compatibility, but beneath that layer, deeper psychological forces are often guiding the pull. The unconscious is shaped by early experiences, emotional conditioning, attachment patterns, and unresolved memories, and it constantly searches for familiar emotional environments, even when they are not healthy or logical. This is why you can feel strongly attracted to someone without being able to fully explain why. The conscious mind tries to justify the attraction with reasons that sound reasonable, but those reasons are usually secondary. The real cause is often an internal recognition of emotional patterns that already exist within you. If someone carries emotional traits that resemble figures from your past, especially early caregivers or significant emotional experiences, the unconscious may register them as familiar, creating a sense of comfort or urgency that feels like attraction. The unconscious is not concerned with what is best for long-term stability. It is concerned with what is emotionally known. Because of this, it can pull you toward people who recreate old dynamics, even if those dynamics were painful or unresolved. This is not a deliberate choice. It is a repetition of emotional templates that seek completion or understanding through new experiences. At the same time, unconscious attraction can also be linked to unmet needs. You may be drawn to someone who seems to carry qualities you feel are missing within yourself, such as confidence, emotional availability, or freedom. In this case, attraction becomes a form of internal compensation rather than mutual alignment. The intensity feels real, but its origin is not always in the present moment or in conscious intention. We are often drawn to what is familiar, not what is healthy, because the mind prioritizes recognition over transformation. Familiarity creates a sense of psychological safety, even when the familiar pattern is emotionally unstable or unfulfilling. The unconscious becomes accustomed to certain emotional environments early in life, especially through repeated relational experiences, and it learns to interpret those patterns as normal. So later in life, when you encounter similar emotional dynamics, even in a different person, there is an immediate sense of comfort or attraction that feels natural, even if it is not actually beneficial. This familiarity is not always obvious. It does not have to look exactly like the past. It can appear in tone, emotional distance, unpredictability, intensity, or even the way someone withholds or gives attention. The unconscious recognizes these subtle cues faster than the conscious mind can analyze them, and it responds with a sense of, "I know this," which can easily be mistaken for connection or compatibility. The problem is that familiarity does not guarantee emotional health. In fact, many people are drawn repeatedly to patterns that recreate unresolved emotional experiences. If someone grew up around inconsistency, they may feel strangely attracted to emotionally inconsistent partners. If someone experienced emotional neglect, they may be drawn to people who are distant or unavailable. The unconscious does not initially evaluate whether the pattern is good or bad. It only registers whether it is known. This is why healthy relationships can sometimes feel less intense or less immediately magnetic. Stability can feel unfamiliar, and unfamiliarity can feel uncomfortable or even boring to an untrained emotional system. Meanwhile, emotionally familiar dynamics can feel powerful, urgent, and deeply meaningful, even when they lead to confusion or repeated pain. Over time, people begin to confuse emotional familiarity with emotional truth. They believe that what feels intense or recognizable must also be right for them, when in reality, it may simply be a repetition of old emotional programming, seeking repetition rather than resolution. We are often conditioned to believe that another person can complete something within us that feels unfinished, but what is really happening is a projection of internal incompleteness onto an external figure. The mind tends to experience certain emotional gaps, such as lack of validation, safety, or belonging, and instead of recognizing these as internal states to be developed, it unconsciously searches for someone who appears to embody the missing quality. This creates the illusion that fulfillment can come from outside, as if another person holds the missing piece of identity or emotional stability. This process is subtle because it feels like attraction or deep connection. When someone seems to carry what you feel you lack, the emotional system becomes highly engaged. You may feel drawn to their confidence, their emotional strength, or their sense of calm, not realizing that what you are actually responding to is your own unintegrated potential being reflected back at you. In this way, the other person becomes a mirror rather than a solution. The difficulty is that this projection creates dependency in perception. Instead of seeing the person clearly, you begin to see them through the lens of what they represent for your internal world. This can lead to idealization, where they appear larger than life or emotionally essential, even though what feels essential is actually the activation of your own unmet needs. Because the sense of incompleteness feels uncomfortable, the mind tries to resolve it externally. It assumes that if the right person stays, the inner emptiness will disappear, but no external presence can permanently resolve an internal developmental gap. At best, another person can trigger awareness of what needs to be developed within yourself. This is why relationships based heavily on projection often feel intense but unstable. The emotional charge is not only about the real connection, but about the psychological hope that someone else will restore a sense of wholeness that has not yet been built internally. Certain people awaken hidden parts of your personality because human identity is not fixed, it is layered, and many aspects of who you are remain inactive until the right emotional environment brings them forward. When you encounter someone who strongly affects you, they can act as a psychological trigger that activates qualities, memories, emotions, and behaviors that are normally dormant in everyday life. This does not mean they are giving you something you do not have, but rather they are creating conditions where what already exists inside you begins to surface. These hidden parts are often tied to unexpressed emotions or undeveloped traits. For example, someone might bring out your vulnerability if you usually operate in control, or they might awaken your intensity if you normally suppress emotional expression. The activation happens because the nervous system responds to emotional significance. When someone matters deeply on a psychological level, they bypass normal social filters and reach deeper layers of the psyche where stored emotional material exists. This process can feel surprising because you may not recognize yourself in certain reactions. You might become more emotional, more attached, more anxious, or even more expressive than usual. It can feel as if the other person has changed you, but in reality, they have only revealed what was already there, but not fully conscious. This is why certain relationships feel like they are changing you, when they are actually exposing different versions of you that were previously inactive. The unconscious uses these encounters to bring balance to the personality. If one side of you has been overdeveloped, another side may emerge through emotional contrast. This can create internal conflict because you are confronted with aspects of yourself you have not fully accepted or understood. The intensity of the connection often comes from this internal exposure rather than the external situation itself. Walking away too soon can sometimes mean avoiding inner transformation because certain relationships are not only about the other person, but about what they activate within your psychological structure. When a strong emotional connection appears, it often brings unresolved inner material to the surface, things like attachment wounds, fears of loss, desire for validation, or unmet emotional needs. If you leave immediately at the first sign of discomfort, you may also be leaving before you have fully understood what this experience is revealing about your inner world. The mind tends to seek relief from emotional tension quickly. When something feels confusing, intense, or destabilizing, the instinct is often to escape it in order to restore comfort. But not all discomfort is a sign of incompatibility. Sometimes discomfort is the result of growth beginning, where old emotional patterns are being challenged by a new relational experience. In such moments, the connection becomes a kind of mirror that reflects parts of yourself that were previously unexamined. Inner transformation requires time because psychological patterns are not understood instantly. They unfold through repeated emotional interactions, triggers, and reflections. If you exit too early, you may interrupt the process before you have seen the deeper meaning behind your reactions. This does not mean every difficult connection should be endured, but it does mean that some experiences carry lessons that only become visible through sustained awareness. There is also a tendency to confuse emotional intensity with danger. When the nervous system becomes activated, it can feel like something is wrong, even when what is happening is simply unfamiliar emotional territory being explored. If you always choose to leave at the peak of emotional activation, you may repeatedly avoid situations that could have led to deeper self-understanding. Transformation does not always feel comfortable while it is happening. It often feels like uncertainty, internal conflict, and emotional exposure. Walking away too soon can sometimes preserve comfort, but it can also preserve the very patterns that were meant to be understood through the experience. Staying too long can also mean repeating emotional cycles, because when awareness is missing, attachment can keep you locked inside the same psychological pattern, even if the situation is no longer evolving. The mind often confuses persistence with progress, believing that if something is endured long enough, it will eventually transform into something different. But emotional patterns do not change through repetition alone. They change through insight, recognition, and conscious interruption of the cycle. When a relationship activates deep emotional wounds, it can create a loop where hope and disappointment alternate. One moment there is closeness, the next there is distance or confusion, and this fluctuation becomes emotionally addictive. The nervous system starts to normalize the cycle, and even painful dynamics begin to feel familiar, which makes it harder to leave. Familiar emotional pain can sometimes feel safer than unfamiliar emotional peace, because the psyche already knows how to survive it. Over time, this creates a situation where the relationship is no longer about growth, but about repetition. The same misunderstandings occur, the same emotional triggers appear, and the same unresolved needs continue to surface without resolution. Instead of moving forward, both the emotional experience and internal development become stuck in a loop of expectation and disappointment. Staying too long without awareness also leads to self-distortion. You begin to adjust your expectations, justify inconsistencies, and reinterpret emotional signals in ways that reduce discomfort. This is the mind trying to maintain attachment, even at the cost of clarity. The original emotional truth becomes blurred, and what remains is a version of the connection that is shaped more by hope than by reality. The deeper issue is that repetition can feel like loyalty, but it is often just unresolved attachment continuing to seek resolution in the same place. Without conscious reflection, the cycle continues, not because there is something to discover, but because nothing has been fully understood or integrated emotionally, and the pattern remains active by default. The idea that someone is meant for you can often be a projection of unmet inner needs, because the mind tends to externalize what it has not yet developed or fulfilled within itself. When a person carries emotional gaps such as a lack of validation, security, affection, or self-worth, those internal states create a sense of incompleteness. instead of recognizing these as inner experiences that need understanding and integration, the psyche often searches outward for a figure who appears to hold the missing qualities. When someone enters your life and seems to embody what you feel is absent, the emotional system responds strongly. This response can feel like recognition or destiny, but what is actually happening is an internal projection being placed onto another person. They begin to represent emotional wholeness, even though they are simply an external individual with their own limitations and complexities. This projection intensifies because the mind prefers symbolic resolution over internal work. It is easier to believe that meeting the right person will fix emotional discomfort than to face the deeper work of building stability within oneself. As a result, the other person becomes emotionally magnified in importance. They are seen not just as who they are, but as what they represent emotionally. Over time, this can distort perception. You may feel that your emotional survival depends on their presence or approval, when in reality the dependency is rooted in your own unprocessed emotional needs. The intensity of attachment is not always a measure of true compatibility, but often a reflection of how strongly internal emptiness is being projected outward. The difficulty with this projection is that it creates an illusion of completion. You believe you have found the missing piece, but what you have actually found is a mirror reflecting something within you that still needs to be understood and integrated internally, rather than assigned to another person as its source. Love becomes clearer when illusion fades and reality is faced, because emotional perception is often shaped by projections, assumptions, and unconscious desires that fill in the gaps of what is not fully known about another person. At the beginning of a connection, the mind tends to create meaning quickly, sometimes faster than actual understanding can develop. It builds a story around the person based on fragments of experience, emotional intensity, and internal expectations. This early stage often feels powerful because imagination is doing a large part of the emotional work. As time passes and interaction continues, reality begins to reveal itself without the filters of idealization. Behaviors become more consistent, patterns become visible, and emotional responses become less influenced by fantasy and more grounded in what actually exists. This process can feel like disillusionment, but it is actually a form of clarification. What was once imagined begins to be replaced by what is real, and this shift allows perception to become more accurate. The fading of illusion does not necessarily reduce love, but it changes its quality. Emotional intensity that was based on uncertainty or projection may decrease, but in its place, a more grounded awareness can emerge. This awareness allows you to see the person as they are, not as what they represented in your inner world. In many cases, this is where true emotional understanding either strengthens or dissolves a connection. Reality also tests emotional compatibility in ways imagination cannot. When expectations are no longer filling the space, you begin to observe how two people actually relate, communicate, and respond to each other's needs. This is where clarity replaces confusion. If the connection is aligned, it becomes more stable and honest. If it is based mainly on projection, it naturally loses its intensity as truth becomes more visible. What remains after illusion fades is not necessarily less meaningful, but more real, because it is no longer shaped by what was imagined, only by what is actually present and experienced between two people in the moment. Emotional timing matters as much as emotional truth, because even when two people genuinely connect on a deep level, the stage of life, inner readiness, and psychological maturity they are each in can completely shape how that connection unfolds. Truth in emotion refers to what is actually felt, but timing determines whether that feeling can be sustained, understood, or expressed in a healthy way. Without alignment in timing, even sincere emotions can become confusing or unstable. A person may feel a strong connection and assume it should naturally develop into something lasting, but if one or both individuals are not internally prepared, the connection often becomes distorted. Readiness is not only about wanting love, it is about being capable of handling emotional responsibility, communication, consistency, and vulnerability. When timing is off, one person may be open while the other is still guarded, or one may be evolving while the other is still processing past emotional experiences. This imbalance creates friction that is often misinterpreted as incompatibility or fate working against the connection. In reality, it is simply misaligned timing. Emotional experiences do not exist in isolation from personal development. Each person carries their own internal rhythm of growth, healing, and awareness, and when these rhythms do not align, even strong feelings struggle to stabilize. Timing also affects perception. The same person can be seen differently depending on where you are emotionally in your own life. When you are more open, you may interpret signals as connection. When you are more guarded, you may interpret the same signals as uncertainty. This shows that emotional truth is not always constant in expression, even if the underlying feeling is real. Because of this, some connections require patience, while others require distance. The difficulty lies in distinguishing between something that is not ready yet and something that is not meant to develop further. And that distinction often only becomes clear through time and emotional awareness rather than immediate reaction. Real connection is not about obsession, but psychological alignment and growth, because obsession is usually driven by emotional imbalance, uncertainty, or unmet internal needs, while real connection is grounded in mutual understanding and stable recognition between two individuals. Obsession creates a sense of urgency, where thoughts become repetitive and emotionally charged, often centered around fear of loss or the need for validation. It feels intense, but that intensity is often a sign of internal disturbance rather than relational harmony. Psychological alignment, on the other hand, refers to how two inner worlds interact in a way that supports clarity rather than confusion. It is not just about shared interests or attraction, but about how each person's emotional patterns, communication style, and level of awareness interact without constant internal conflict. When alignment exists, there is less need for emotional guessing or overthinking, because interactions feel more direct and grounded in reality. Growth is another key element of real connection. A meaningful bond does not only activate emotional intensity, it also encourages self-awareness and development. Instead of trapping a person in cycles of anxiety or dependency, it gradually reveals deeper understanding of oneself and the other person. This does not mean the relationship is always easy, but the challenges it brings are meaningful and lead to clarity rather than confusion. Obsession often resists growth because it fixes attention on a single outcome or person as the solution to internal discomfort. It reduces the complexity of emotional experience into fixation, where the mind repeatedly returns to the same focus point without resolution. Real connection does not demand constant mental occupation. Instead, it allows space for individuality, reflection, and emotional balance. When alignment and growth are present together, the connection feels stable even during difficulty. There is a sense of clarity beneath emotional experiences, where both individuals can see each other more truthfully rather than through distortion or need-based perception, and this clarity is what distinguishes meaningful connection from psychological attachment driven by obsession.